Welcome on into this week's episode of Digging Deeper. I'm Matt Cordy, joined here today by a guy going through his midlife crisis.
Hey.
The cleanest way possible. It's Pastor Gabe Kasper.
Here I am, man. Here I am. The cleanest midlife crisis you could imagine.
Yeah. And you're the goat of soap, or you make it at least.
I make it at least.
Yeah.
Tough to say if I am, but I do love that soap. It's very good. Have you purchased any of my soap, Matt?
I have not.
Have I given you any?
You have not.
We'll have to remedy that.
This is awkward.
Yeah, it was uncomfortable.
Yeah. That's all right. That's all right.
That's all right.
Well, really liked this sermon from this past week. I know I heard that from other people as well. And I say that most Sundays, or most, I guess, Wednesdays here, but it was true.
Be awkward if it wasn't the case. Be like,
yeah.
But sometimes you hit a single. You know?
I heard the kids really liked it with all the weighing out that was going on, sort of the 6-7 motion.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm sure they liked it, though.
They probably did. You know, I like all old people, hate that and don't get it. Mm-hmm. But also, I'm like, let the kids have it. Yeah. You know, there's nothing bad about it. It's just a little fun.
Yeah, there's a lot of things where there is, but
there's other things where there. That one.
Yeah,
it's pretty good. It's a clean number.
And it seems like all the kids are in on it.
That's
really
true.
Us that's on the outside.
That's true, and I should just accept that.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's good.
Well, talk about references that only part of us get.
Yeah.
You had a reference to Turnstile this past week, which was a band I'm actually somewhat familiar with, not fully, but
sure.
I know of them and know a couple songs and everything.
Yeah,
and I thought it was interesting just how you were talking about that aspect of never enough, never getting to fully get what you're wanting out of life.
Sure.
And how that's something that sort of permeates throughout culture as well.
Yeah.
I could think of, I watch a lot of TV shows. I mean, it's in a lot of shows, sort of that aspect of someone just like could be at the top of their career, top of their relationship stat, whatever it is, but they're still looking for something else, and there's still that.
Yeah.
And it's sort of relatable. I think we can all feel that at times.
Oh, totally.
But I also know, reading through the book, if everyone else did, we saw that Matt Popovitz also had a cultural reference. It was to The Greatest Showman.
Yes.
Or another song called Never
Enough.
Enough. So, yeah, it's just something that has sort of been culturally relevant for a long time.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that way. And I, of course, read his chapter and saw that reference. And I do, in fact, love that movie. I think it's really good. The music's phenomenal. Like, no complaints. Hugh Jackman does a great job. Big fan. But I had to I'm not going to talk about a musical, you know? I like musical theater.
Save that for Matt.
Save that for Matt. Save that for Matt. That's his deal. He's got a theater degree. Let that be him. I'm going to talk about a hardcore band. I got a degree in hardcore from the mean streets of Macomb County, Michigan, baby. You know? And it's funny, I did hesitate on using that example because, again, I know the stuff that I'm really into is oftentimes not like this universally known or appreciated things. But I was like, man, these guys really have had some pretty significant crossover success. And so to your point, you're relatively familiar with them. I mean, you also like heavy music, but I also know, just for anyone keeping score at home, the hardcore gatekeepers might get upset that I even referred to them as hardcore because they really have genre shifted and have become almost like a pop hardcore band, which is seems oxymoronic, but I think they've done it.
I would say, that song alone.
Yeah, it's a pretty poppy song. It is not that heavy. Yeah.
I know the 2030s group listened to it on Monday.
Did they?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, so
that's so good. I mean, it's a great song.
The amount of times your references just get lived out in our lives. I remember when I was a student, you referenced Fight Club, which we don't talk about, obviously.
Yeah, obviously.
But I remember my friend group, we all went home and watched it that Sunday night.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
Did you like it?
We don't talk about it.
Oh, sorry. Forgot.
But what we do talk about, I really liked. Sorry, we'll get into the meat and potatoes in a minute. But one more band thing.
Yeah.
We talked about Reliant K there at the end.
I
which,
did.
As a younger millennial and someone that grew up in the church youth group scene.
Heck yeah.
Loved it. So I don't know. Just wanted to call that out before we really got into things here. But
I've always liked that line, right? The beauty of grace is that it makes life now. It's such a good line.
Mm-hmm.
And Matt Thiessen, the lead singer for Reliant K, lead songwriter for them, that's their magic. Is he is such a good writer, in a genius level. And I've always thought that's one of his best lines. Small trivia factoid. I think you maybe already knew this, but I actually opened for Reliant K once.
Oh, really?
So true story. Yeah,
I
back in the day. Yeah, in Milwaukee at the Rave.
Ooh, look at you now.
Yeah, I know. It's all gone downhill, but here we are. You know.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Also, my first car was a Plymouth Reliant K, 92.
Wow.
Yep. You weren't even born.
No, I was not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, starting to get back here into the sermon a little bit more. You have a quote in your unused notes here from Albert Camus, who's a skeptic, which I think is sort of funny. Just getting like one of your official titles within history is skeptic,
skeptic,
which I'm sure in philosophy has some deeper meaning, but I do think it's sort of funny just to be called a skeptic in your life. But anyways, he had a quote talking about that even without a God, like if you don't believe there is a God, you're still facing some sort of judgment, even if it's not from God, it might be from other people.
Yeah, exactly. So, so Albert Camus, French, got to look out for it. Yeah. So Albert Camus, I mean, famously a skeptic, and a skeptic is there's a technical definition for it, where it is. I mean, as you might imagine, it's the sort of person who just sort of like kind of refuses to land whole hog anywhere and just remains at a sort of skeptical distance from just about anything and everything, right? And so he notoriously is a skeptic and really mostly an atheist, though there's actually all these interesting, he did lectures for a group of Jesuits once and talked about how he had struggles with faith, but neither here nor there. But Camus, and it's a quote I've used of his before, actually. I mean, it's been years, and so that's why I didn't end up using it, but he, I think, summarizes the idea of like, hey, you can get rid of God, but everyone else then becomes your judge. I think he gets at it better than anyone else. So he wrote a book called The Rebel, kind of post World War II, and he's sort of like exploring the rise of the spirit of sort of bohemianism, which was kind of like, they kind of predated the hippies, if you will, but kind of that early, like artsy fartsy, like crew, sort of romantic type people that was really typical of Parisian life at the time. And he was somewhat critical of it because they were sort of this anti-institutionalism, anti-traditionalism, anti-God type sentiment. Right. And so he says this in the quote. He says, up to now, man derived his coherence from the Creator, capital C. But from the moment that he consecrates his rupture from him, he finds himself delivered over to the fleeting moment, to the passing days, and to wasted sensibility. Right. So first of all, the first part of his argument here is like, you detach yourself from a capital C creator, you end up in a meaning crisis. And Camus is most known as an existentialist. He's probably the foremost of existentialisms, Myth of Sisyphus, this whole thing. Anyway, he says, like all people without a rule of life, so you don't have like some sort of grounding in life, he is only coherent as an actor. He can only be sure of his own existence by finding it in the expression of others' faces. Other people are his mirror. A mirror that quickly becomes clouded. Perpetually incomplete, he compels others to create him while denying their values. He plays at life because he is unable to live it. So it's pretty like strong words. And again, this is coming from a guy who's not a Christian, but he essentially says, if God's not going to be the judge of your life, everyone else is. And in many ways, of course, he's writing pre-social media, of course, but like, do we not see his words sort of reflected in the echo chambers that get created around us in social media, or how we end up letting the internet tell us who we are, let the internet tell us what our identity should be, that sort of thing, what we're supposed to aspire to, what we're supposed to live for, that like, if you just Google looks maxing real quick, or I just learned a new one from our college students. It's called aura farming. You familiar with this? You didn't know that? Yeah. You knew this? Yeah. This is the elder, younger, millennial breakdown, I guess.
That's right.
Right? But where you try to present yourself in a way so that like you give off a particular aura, right? And you sort of harvest other people's responses to the aura that you're giving off. And that's what you do, right? Like without God, that's what you end up doing. You default to sort of an aura farming way of doing life. And to Camus' point, that's not life, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
So that's it. But I just didn't have space for it, and I've used it before. And that's really why I didn't make the cut.
No, I think it was good. And you had another quote here from Jennifer Brahini Wallace, and I know that she had a quote within the sermon as well, but you have some extra stuff here. And she had that quote talking about the at-risk group. I mean, third most now is sort of that affluent, middle-class kids, and that, I don't know, that was pretty interesting. And you obviously tied in, like Ann Arbor, University of Michigan, like I think that definitely hit for people. But she has another quote here about how social media isn't actually the root of those toxic pressures. It can certainly doesn't help it.
Right.
Might even make it worse. But it's not necessarily the root of it, is what she's claiming here.
Yeah, right. So this is in a conversation she's having with Scott Galloway, and who's I don't even know. He's a professor at NYU, but kind of a businessy, podcasty, sort of internet personality dude. A lot in the tech space in particular. But at any rate, she's being interviewed by him, and he asks like, hey, you talk about these affluent kids who are now like profoundly at risk. Do you think social media is really the cause of it? Is that what's been the accelerant? And so she says, social media is certainly a magnifier and an accelerant to these toxic pressures, but it's not the root of it. And again, I think that's true in general for all of us, for whatever that's worth, where it's like we know, just real quick, like parents at home, like social media is bad for your kids. Like it's a fact. We know this. We have the data. It's like giving your kids a pack of cigarettes. Like, don't do it. Okay. We know it's bad for them. But it's not like it created the bad thing. All it does is magnify. And this is, I don't know why I believe in original sin and that like we have a sinful nature. It's because it's like, hey, when we all got together, what happened? Oh, we started just destroying each other. Like it's just a fact. So anyway, so it's not the root though. The root of this, she says, is a lack of mattering universally, a lack of feeling valued for who we are at our core. We feel valued now for what we achieve, how much money we make. Society tells us certain people matter more. Those influencers matter more. Those with the most likes matter more. What I see as a social media crisis is a crisis of mattering, and that goes much deeper than social media. I mean, I think that just hits, and it's very interesting. I'm a big fan of he's actually a psychologist named Richard Beck, but he also is just very deeply read in theology. And so he has a Substack where he mostly writes about theology, but he has a book called The Shape of Joy, in which his whole argument is that really the psychological research now is uncovering again and again and again in 1,000 different ways that the core issue for so much of the sort of mental health epidemic we live in is this meaning crisis, is this lack of mattering in this world at a deep universal level, that it's like, I can matter like to my friends or to my parents or to my teachers, and like that's good and we need that. Like that's how mattering kind of puts skin on. But like if I don't have cosmic significance, it is really hard to overcome some critical, debilitating mental health crises we can have. And so I think she taps into that, and I think the cosmic scale plays into that as well, because if I don't see that, because again, as we talked about on the front end, like there's quote after quote after quote after quote of movie stars, of athletes, of business leaders who made it to the pinnacle and said, this wasn't it. This wasn't it. And so there's this core human longing for mattering that the cosmic scale will never balance out. We will never balance it out. Even if we succeed, how much more so for those of us who maybe don't succeed and end up on the losing end of life, right? And so, and I think social media just reflects that.
Yeah. And I think on social media, you just see the most curated, like, best side usually of people, like that they're trying to put out there into the world, and trying to compare yourself to that, like, doesn't help in any way possible. So yeah, I don't think that helps anything at all. And I think sort of mapping that onto social media, like you said, is pretty helpful here. Yeah, totally. So in the sermon, you talked about another sermon. A couple of sermons. You actually talked about a couple different sermons. Meta sermon. Yes. Wheels within wheels. We'll talk about Jesus' sermon, because it's a good place to start. But his Sermon on the Mount. And you talked about how Jesus was showing us the weight of sin, and how he went through different examples of, you've heard it say, but this I say to you. And he sort of went through different things and really opened up some eyes, like, oh, I've not murdered someone. I mean, speak for yourself. But I'm just kidding. But anyways, like, if you go on what Jesus is saying, we all fall short. Yeah. But you have some examples here, sort of more modern day examples pulled from the zeitgeist that you tried to fit into your sermon here. You actually tried to work it in there a couple different ways I can see here within your unused notes that you want to talk about, and I'll give you some space to talk about that here now. Yeah, so let me work through that. So I was trying to think, like, man, what's a way I can get at the way in which the weight of sin is so significant that there's just not enough good to balance it out. Like, we just can't. Like, we're just so caught up in this web that we can't get our ways out. And so I thought, well, what is, like, in many ways, I think right now, top of everyone's mind. I mean, it's hard to say, our news cycle's insane right now, but in many ways, the Epstein files, right, where I think we're seeing at a global scale, like elites from across the world, right, are caught up in the web with this dude who did these horrific things. And so then it becomes this thing of, like, well, what does complicity look like with this? That was the other part of the reason I cut this, because I can't say that word, complicity. But of, like,
if you ever talked with Epstein, like, should you lose your job? If you knew about something, didn't say something, it seems like, well, you probably should lose it. If you participated, yeah, you probably should face prosecution. Right. So like those things are obvious, but what about like you didn't know, but you kept hanging out? Like people are trying to figure out like this thing is so grotesque that like, what's the sphere of it, right? And so in the same way, I kind of wanted to get at like, and we rightly, it's good that the wicked are judged. Like judgment is falling, and that is a good thing. Yeah. And then the thing I'd want to say though is to say like, okay, but in the same way that Jesus says, do not commit adultery, but if you look at someone lustfully, you've committed adultery in your heart, right? In the same way, like we know, like this is a fact, the pornography fuels sex trafficking, fuels human trafficking, right? And so then if we were to say like, hey, listen, anyone who's caught up in that dude's web, judgment should fall on them. I agree. I'm all for it. But then when we say, well, how far do we want this web to go? Because if anyone's ever consumed porn at all, you've contributed in some way to that web. And so all of a sudden, judgment, like that's a very, very high percentage of people, and would have been a very high percentage of people who were listening to me. And so like and so that to me, the hope is to get at the perniciousness of sin and how it so spreads that way. I opted not to do it for a couple of reasons. One, you can tell I'm even having a hard time like trying to say it the right way because it is a deeply charged topic. And it's like, just a delicate subject. And I just was like, I don't want to distract from the point, there's a way in which the illustration can distract from the actual point you're trying to make. And so I didn't want to do that. And I also realize it's a politically charged thing. And in some sense, I don't think it should be like evil people doing evil things. I don't care what your politics are. Yeah. Like you did a bad thing. Like, sorry, but nature of the beast is like, I got better things to do than respond to partisan emails all day. So I'm just not going to dip my toe in that. And then the third reason I didn't was I called my best friend Ryan and was like, dude, here's what I'm thinking of doing. Do you think I should do this? And he was like, you should not. And he is very wise. So I didn't. But now you get kind of the background on that and hopefully maybe see how, like, when just this one sort of highly sort of notorious moment we're in right now, how that actually ends up inflecting in such a massive ripple effect, even beyond the people that make the headlines, but the people in their computer screens in their living rooms. Like, it's like it goes all the way throughout.
Yeah, and you even mentioned it, even with like the Mexico cartels and everything as well.
Right. So that then cuts to a slightly different point. So, and I ended up reducing this whole move into one sentence where I said, when we think about balancing out the scales, if the way certain other religions did, which is something I highlight, that doesn't factor into take account for the fact that the German philosopher Martin Heidegger talks about our thrownness, that there's this idea in which each one of us is thrown into a world that was not of our own making. We just sort of find ourselves in the world we're thrown into. Now, Matt, you and I were thrown into, in the grand scheme of human history, and even right now, pretty ideal circumstances, and pretty ideal moral circumstances at that. Yeah. Whereas, we look at what's going on with in Mexico right now with the cartel. The cartels, as last I checked, is something like the 5th largest employer in that entire country, right? And so you imagine you're born into poverty, and they say like, "Hey, stand guard at this dude's compound, 10-hour shifts. We'll pay you X number of dollars. You can feed your family." Now, we may on the outside be like, how dare you work for someone as evil? And again, I'm not saying moral agency doesn't exist. I'm not saying people can't make hard moral choices that have sacrifice. Okay. Like, I get that. But I also am like, I think 90% of us would be like, yeah, I'm going to feed my family and stand guard. But now I'm caught up in a war defending a dude who does horrific things. Right. Yeah. And so there's a way in which our moral circumstances are not equivalent really in this world. And so thinking that there's some sort of scale that we should be judged by, man, that's this doesn't seem right. That's actually unjust, I think. Which is why we need grace so much, again, because the web spreads so far and so vast, the web of sin, that it's like, man, if we don't have the grace of God, we're just hosed.
Yeah, it's hard to find perfect justice without it.
You can't have it without it, I don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a great point. All right. Now, we have another unused note from a podcast that you listen to that I'd love for you to break down.
Yeah. Just let it rip. Okay. Yeah, this is one where I wrote it out because I want to put it in a sermon at some point, and And so I wrote it because I was like, maybe it'll fit. It really doesn't. I don't even know what my point would have been with it. Maybe you'll figure it out for me, Matt.
We'll try.
But I pretty regularly listen to a podcast in which people call into this dude who's a psychologist, clinical psychologist, and they, share whatever their troubles are, relationship troubles, what have you, and he just counsels them, gives them advice over the podcast. I do it on the one hand, it's like helpful for me as I walk with people and counsel people, and because I think he does a pretty good job. And so I'm learning a lot from him. And to be honest, if I'm honest with you, Matt, it's a little bit voyeuristic as well, because sometimes it's like pretty spicy stories where you're like, oh my gosh. And then you're like, and then you also feel better about yourself because I'm like, at least I'm a better husband than that, like that sort of thing. But I'm just being real, Matt.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm glad you are.
Thank you. But there was an episode where I profoundly disagreed with the psychologist in the podcast. His mom calls in, and this is the story I've wanted to tell, but just, I don't know, didn't fit. Where she calls in, she's like, hey, I'm having trouble with my teenage boys. I got my son. I let my kids do 2 hours of video games every day, which that's insane, by the way. Don't do that. Sorry, I know, like, you're not supposed to give people advice on parenting. It's like the last thing in the world that if you do that, people are like, don't you dare. But I'm like, it's just another sort of one where I'm like, it's not a good idea. Yeah. Okay, moving along. Come at me. We turn the comments off. I don't care. But she's like, so the other day, she tells the psychologist, she's like, the other day, I told my son, like, hey, you got to get off the video games. It's time to eat dinner. And her son, his response to that was he told her to buzz off, except he didn't use the word buzz. He used a different word. Begins with the letter F. But we don't want to get the E on this podcast.
Yes.
So he said that to his mom. And the psychologist said, I want you to know when your son said that wasn't a character deficiency on his part. That was a tools deficiency. He just didn't know how to communicate what he was feeling appropriately. And so that's why he said that. It wasn't a character thing. It was a tools thing. Right. And I was like screaming in my steering wheel, like, no, it absolutely is a character thing. Now, it's probably also a tools thing. Like things can be two things. Okay. But like, it's a character thing to say that to the woman who gave you life. Like that's actually a significant character flaw. Like it's a problem. And I think my point was ultimately like, that's the whole story. Okay. Was me getting mad at this guy, like trying to like overly therapeutize a moral issue. And I think we have a tendency to do that. And so that was maybe gonna be my point is like, I think so often we try to just like over psychologize what's just sin. And like, it's actually okay to call it sin. And in fact, I think it's damaging to not call it what it is and just pretend like, oh, it's just little quirks, he didn't have the right tools. It's like, no, man, like that's in Jesus' words, that's murder. Yeah. To the woman who gave him life. That's a really serious thing. And it's not a little like, let's just give them some therapeutic tools. It's like, now again, you can do that. Kids should learn how to communicate better and whatever. But like, I think we do ourselves a deep disservice as moral creatures to just kind of wash those things away under the guise of psychology. And again, I'm very pro therapy, pro psychology. Okay. But like that was when I was like, give me a break.
Yeah. No, it's a difficult line to walk where you don't want to condone anything, but at the same time, like sin is sin.
That's the thing. Yeah. Yeah. And it's weird to not call it that. And it's actually, I think, problematic to not call it that.
Yeah.
It really is.
It's not helping either person. Really.
It doesn't help either one. It doesn't help this kid to be like, oh, you just didn't have the tools. It's like, I mean, because that's the thing. I think like if anyone said that to my wife, if my kid said, anyone says it, like, I'm not going to be like, oh, they just didn't have the tools. And be like, dude, you don't talk to this person I love that way. Yeah. And God in the same way is like, you don't talk to this woman I created and love dearly and Jesus died for that way. It's actually not okay. Yeah.
So one of the things I really liked from this chapter that Matt was writing was he talked about how we're never good enough. He mentions that there's an adage that the bad news of Christianity is worse than you want to think, but the good news of faith is better than you can possibly fathom. Later on, he says that God is holier than we can imagine, and humankind is more awful than we can even begin to grasp or admit. I just like how he breaks that down in that way. Yeah. And I think even in your sermon, you talk about how that we can't balance out those scales without Jesus. And I think that just the weight of that is hard to picture at times where you just think, oh, I just said buzz off to my mom. Like it's not a big deal. Like, but I think trying to grasp just like the totality of our sin is not easy to think of, and we don't want to think about it either.
No, I think that's right. And I think this is part of the secret sauce of the gospel and of Christianity in general. And he and Matt would say this, this is a sort of Tim Kellerism of like, it's something along the lines of like, you are far worse than you think, and you are more loved than you could possibly imagine, right? That both of these things are simultaneously true. And that's actually the beauty of it, is like, if I stay in the far worse than I think, then I just sit around feeling bad all the time.
Yep.
And if I stay in the just like, well, I'm loved, I actually start to take that for granted, and it doesn't really matter. But the beauty of the gospel is it puts these things together, and we actually then are enabled to walk through life with humble confidence.
Yeah.
And that's the best way to go through life, is like, the best person you know has humble confidence. Anyone you've met who you've been like, man, there's something about that person I really like dig, or there's something about who they are. Like, what it is they have humble confidence. Like, they're secure in who they are. Mm-hmm. They know they have that existential value, that they matter at a universal scale, that I have a savior who died for me. You have a savior who died for you. Mm-hmm. Like, I have that deep in my soul. So I'm confident, like, try and touch me, homie. Right. Yeah. Like, that's taken care of. And I have a savior that had to die for me, because I'm not the greatest thing since sliced bread, and I am fallible, and I do have limits, and I will die, and I do sin. And so that gives me that humility that keeps me rooted. And so that's the beauty of the Gospels. It gives us both that humility and that confidence to walk through life. And so I think that's, I don't know, one of the most attractive things to me about the Christian message.
Yeah, that tension there, I think, is difficult to live in. Yeah. But I do think, like you talked about, you can sort of tell, like, when you see someone that is sort of living simultaneously, like in the simul, in saint and sinner. Yeah, like, that's right. You bring those two together, and then I think that's where that, like, you can truly find peace.
That's right.
I also just like how Matt talked about, like, he obviously talked about our relationship with God, but he also just talked about just other relationships as well. Yeah. And how, like, if you're in a marriage, or mother and son, like, if you're just trying to compare things, like, just keep a tally, like, it's not even. It's not going to be just. But I do think that using that sort of example was helpful as well.
No, I think that's right. I mean, so yeah, he talks about like transactional relationships, right? And transactional relationships, like, if you want to ruin your marriage, make it transactional. Mm-hmm. Be like, well, I did the dishes, so you have to do, like, that's a recipe for a horrible marriage. Like, it doesn't work. Like, love goes all in. And so the idea is, like, both of you are all in all the time. And it's the same thing with friendships, man. You want a bad friendship, make it transactional. Like, transactional relationships are fine. If I have a transactional relationship with Target, okay? You appropriately price these things, I will purchase them. Yeah. That's fine, okay? I'm good having that relationship with Target. I'm not good having that relationship with my friend Matt, right? Like, that's just not how it's going to work. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's right. And it's the same thing with God, where it's not transactional in that sense. I mean, in one sense, there's a transaction in that he takes our sin, we get Christ's righteousness. But then the actual walking and living in that relationship is not that way. It's actually just him pouring out grace upon grace upon grace, and us responding. Can I add one other thing?
Do it.
If I may. Well, the holiness aspect, because I actually didn't tap into the holiness, because I always like, holiness matters a lot, and like sort of God's holiness and his perfection and us not being holy and perfect. Like, that's a thing that matters and is an important theological concept. And holiness is like, it's a hard concept, because like, what does it mean? Like, I mean, it means other. Like, that's like, you know, it means like it's distinct, it's sacred, it's different from us in a sort of qualitative sense. Yeah. But that's like, we just don't think in those categories as much, so it's not one that I lean into. But have you ever heard this is like, it's a legendary children's message that has happened at churches around the globe, probably, on how we might think of sin as it pertains to holiness. So get ready.
I'm ready.
Okay.
Buckle in.
The teacher of the children's message says, all right, kids, I want you to imagine a bowl of rice. Mm-hmm. It's God's holiness. It's your holiness. And let's just say I put just a little bit of dog poop in there. Just a little bit.
Do you actually have physical dog poop?
You could do it. I think I've heard of someone actually doing that. Wow. I know. Quite graphic. And the idea is like, do you want to eat that rice now? There's just a little bit in there. I mean, it's still mostly rice.
How big's the bowl?
Would that make a difference to you?
I won't answer that here. We all start in a different place.
Yeah. But the point being, for most people, like, dude, even a little bit of the poo, like, I'm not going to touch it, right? So that's the idea, is like God's holiness is so other, it's so grand that like the stain of sin at any level entering into that, not good.
Yeah.
So
we'll sort of end this segment where you almost ended your sermon. In your manuscript, you actually potentially had a story and even a parable here that you were going to drop in. You talked about the kids in the parable of the vineyard.
Yeah. So I ran out of time, but this was like, could have been a closing illustration. I didn't even write it out because it's one I know well enough. But getting at the unfairness of grace and that being a good thing. So of course, kids, if you ever hung out with a child ever at all, like their primary moral category is fair versus unfair.
Sure.
Right. That is their everything. And so my kids, of course, like stuff comes up where they'll be like, Levi got a granola bar and I didn't. It's not fair.
Yeah.
And so whenever they whine me about fair, I'll say, oh, come here. Let me tell you guys a story. Jesus tells this story in which there's a man who owns a vineyard. And at this point, like, they just start screaming and tell me to stop. But for those who are not familiar with the parable of the vineyard, Matt knows it, obviously, in which this dude owns a vineyard and he goes out and he says, hey, man, I'll pay you $10 to work in my vineyard all day. And the guy says, sure, I'll do it. Then a few hours later, he finds another dude and says, hey, I'll pay you $10 to work in my vineyard all day. Day goes on and the guy still needs more workers. And so there's really only a couple hours left and he still pays a couple more people $10. And then the guy goes through and he goes and they all line up, the workers of the vineyard, and he pays them all $10. And the dude who worked all day sees the guy who only worked an hour or two and says, like, dude, this isn't fair. And the owner of the vineyard says, like, dude, didn't I say I was going to give you $10 for working whole day? Is that what you agreed to?
Yeah. And
the guy's like, yeah. And he's like, then don't get upset that I'm being generous to this other guy. Like, you got what I said you'd give, and this guy gets more. And I think, again, that's the beauty of grace. And it's fun to tell that story to my kids whenever they're upset about being unfair. Is like, yeah, dude, life's not fair. Thank God for that. And that's to say, and obviously this is where conversations around like deathbed conversions come in and stuff like that, where it's
Thief
like
on the cross.
What Thief on the Cross is like the example, right? And that's, again, the beauty of grace is that it makes life not fair.
Yeah.
Hashtag Matt Thiessen, hashtag Reliant K.
Hashtag is a pound symbol for those of you that didn't get the LOL reference.
So good.
So
yeah, man, I don't know where that came from for me. I just really felt like leaning into the LOLs.
Yeah.
Lots of love. WTF? Why the face?
Yeah. All right. Well, next week we're going to be diving into the ruler, and it'll be Pastor Marcus. Thank goodness. 2 weeks of Gabe.
Sorry, everyone.
I think, yeah. Oh, I was going to open up the podcast with like, oh, Pastor Marcus isn't here. We could do whatever we want. But
that would have been a good joke because I made that several times.
Maybe I'll do it next week with Marcus since he won't be here.
Yeah, that's true.
But I already spoiled it.
Yeah.
But anyways, Pastor Marcus will be here, and we'll be going through chapter 3 of Mountains and Measurements. And then also with your group or in your own personal devotion or whatever, you can go through the optional chapter 4, the why of work. But that won't explicitly be mentioned in the sermon, but maybe digging deeper is a good spot to talk about that a little bit. I don't know. We'll see if Marcus is up to it. I guess he will be. But anyways, the ruler, and it'll be Galatians 3, 1 through 14. So looking forward to that.
It's going to be great.
Yeah. Thanks again, and make sure to stay around for Amy and Nate on the other side.
Deuces.
Hi, everyone.
Hey.
Nate and Amy back again to kind of share where the music fit into this past Sunday's sermon and overall theme. And I really loved the idea of what Pastor Gabe was talking about with the whole cosmic scale. And for me, like, I really felt like I have a scale. And it's, in everything that I do, whether it be like comparing myself to other people or feeling like I'm not doing enough or feeling like I'm not worthy or shameful or whatever. All of the things he talked about, I was so convicted.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, I loved the sermon, and I loved the idea of how we can be actually freer because of the grace that Jesus has given us, because of him paying for our sins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. that the scale is completely, like, there's no balancing it. Like, well, I'm kind of bad, I'm kind of good. It's like when you're just in total need, it's to bring you to that place of relationship, like to a father, to a father or mother, like like a child calling out, like, can't feed themselves, they can't
Right.
can't open the door, they can't do anything, they're too short. And it's like we can't do without him, but we can convince ourselves that we can. And yeah, I've always, one thing I noticed I do a lot is I'll look up how old people were. Like I'll look up like the Beatles, I'm like, how old were they when they like did that? I'm like, they're 19. I'm like, so I'm always comparing ages. I'm always like, all right, how much time do I have? I just found this one band I like. The guy's like 45 or 50, and they're like just became classic. Okay, there's a chance.
That one I can still have a chance.
Beethoven, I think he was like 30 something.
It's so funny that you would say that. Grace, my daughter Grace, would say, because I started a business when I was 18.
Yeah,
and she's like, Mom, I'm barely doing nothing, but it's funny, I don't think about it that way now. It's like, even, it just goes back to what Pastor Gabe was talking about. Even when we have all these things, whether they be accomplishments or success,
yeah,
it's just never enough.
Yeah, never enough. Yeah, that was the song. The song from
Turnstile.
Hardcore band. Yeah, we listened to it in the 2030s group. Interesting. But yeah, it's just there's no way to balance it out, and it's just like give it a rest, and
Let it go.
it's continually. It's just something you're relearning, But yeah, the song that kind of plays into this. We were talking about how deep the Father's love for us, and just about our sin, trying to balance our wrongs against our rights and things. And the chorus of this just talks about placing the wrongs and the sins, and really it's kind of our self-righteousness too.
Right.
On Jesus is our righteousness. Jesus is the payment for our sin too. It's everything that we hope for and everything that we, dislike about ourselves. It's all on him. And the line is, it was my sin that held him there until it was accomplished. His dying breath has brought me life. I know that it is finished. And like the idea that it's finished, like, I mean, that whole scale thing is about like compensating and like
continually balancing or trying to make it okay.
Yeah. And it's almost like without that, that's kind of how we gauge I was here, but now I'm here. Like I had that size house. Now I have this size house, or, it's like, that's the only way to gauge progress. And to say it is finished is like a ending of that whole system of evaluating yourself.
Right.
It's pretty hard to imagine living without it, honestly. Which shows that I still need a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, I loved what you said earlier too about how, like, taking it from, if we can change our thinking where we think of gratitude at everything we have, whether it be the gift of playing guitar or singing or having children or the coffee that we have in the morning or whatever, if we can change that and realize that they all come from God, as opposed to us, taking pride in that or trying to control it, I think is a way. It just becomes freeing. It's all finished.
Even our faculties are gifts.
Yeah.
While we're doing them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was our theme for this Lent. So
yeah. Gratitude.
They all played into it. So.
All right. We're going to sing that song. Thanks.
Very good.
Behold the man upon the cross, my sin upon his shoulders. Ashamed, I hear my mocking voice call out among the scoffers. It was my sin that held him there until it was accomplished. His dying until it was accomplished. His dying breath has brought me life. I know that it is finished. His dying breath has brought me life. I know that it is finished. Amen.
Thanks again, Amy and Nate, for walking through that. I know that scale is something that we can all pretty easily see in our lives and see ways where sometimes that does start to seep in, even though we know that Jesus is on that other side of that scale for us, weighing down and evening out all of our sins. Loved hearing how deep the Father's love for us as well. So that's all we have for this week's episode of Digging Deeper. Coming up ahead next week will be The Ruler, and that'll be Pastor Marcus joining us, and we'll be going through chapter 3 of Junk Drawer Jesus, and that is of mountains and measurements. And optional as well, we'll probably dive into it a little bit. It'll be chapter 4, the why of work. That's not going to be covered necessarily in the sermon, but hey, that's what Digging Deeper is for. So we might be digging into that here. Sermon next Sunday will be on Galatians 3, 1 through 14. So head to Galatians if you're looking for a jump start there. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll catch you next week. God bless.